welcome to episode 163 of AviaDev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. Now, ahead of the AviaDev Africa online event on the 9th to the 11th of June 2021, we're focusing on organizations that have really doubled down on innovation and that are supporting or could support the African aviation industry in its bid for recovery. For those of you who are regular listeners, you know we're absolutely obsessed with improving cooperation and collaboration within industry players. And virtual interlining and interlining has been something we've seen a heck of a lot over the last 6 months or so within the African continent and beyond as well. Today, we're going to explore that concept. And to do that, I am joined by Nick Ashton, who is the head of partnerships at Dohop, also industry affairs, I believe, as well, Nick. Now, for those of you who are avid listeners, back last year, 2020, in episode 105, I interviewed the Dohop CEO, David Gunnarsson. The landscape has obviously changed massively since that point, but if anything, the concept has become even more pertinent and even more sort of relevant as time has gone on. Nick himself has worked in airline strategy and alliances for the last 15 years. He's worked with airlines such as British Airways, Qatar Airways, Virgin Australia, and most recently Vueling, based out of Barcelona. So today we're going to explore that concept of virtual interlining and how the African market, the African carriers can really take advantage of that and implement the solution to improve their collaboration, but ultimately make them more lean, more efficient, and improve their profitability. So welcome to the podcast, Nick, after that lengthy intro.
Lengthy and 15 years. Gosh, it's a reminder that I've been in this industry for quite a while now. Obviously, it feels like it's only been a couple of weeks, but 4 airlines in there. So yeah. No, thank you for that, and a pleasure to be here and talking to you today.
Awesome. So let's sort of focus in on that. You've had 15 years in the airline sector, and now, of course, you're still very much in there, but you're a little bit on the other side of the table in a solutions role. So what made you make that leap? And can you give those who haven't had the opportunity to either join our session that we did in March, talking about virtual interlining, or haven't listened to David's episode yet, give us a bit of background on Dohop as well?
Well, the background really starts 20 years ago for me, when I was at university. And I took a trip where I traveled on British Airways to San Francisco, but decided that I wanted to go to San Diego. Now, to actually book on British Airways to San Diego was too expensive. So I had a look around and saw that if I flew into San Francisco, I could then go to Oakland and take a Southwest flight down to San Diego. So I created my own self-connection. So 20 years ago, I was doing this, and lots of other people were making these connections themselves. And plenty of people do that today, taking a train to an airport to take a flight, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to start there and then go through my airline background, because it gives the context as to why I've landed at Dohop and why I'm excited to do so. So again, thank you for pointing out the 15 years. It does feel like a couple of weeks, but I had a life before airlines. I was actually working in Japan and then as a researcher for an MP. But in 2007, the British Airways graduate scheme was advertised in the UK. And because of that love of travel and self-connections and being able to go places, see things, do things, I applied for it. I've always loved planes as well. I got onto the scheme, which was great. But the really cool thing about that was they spun us around the business. So I actually started in customer service at Heathrow. I was there for the opening of T5, which was an experience. After that, I went into network planning during the global financial crisis. So our team was shrunk and our workload was increased, which sounds kind of familiar to events today. And after that, I thought I needed a slightly quieter life, so I went to marketing. Thereafter, I found what I'd call my passion or my calling, which is airline partnerships. So I went to the alliances department in BA, where I looked after relationships with some of the One World partners we had, but also the Sun Air franchise in Denmark and Comair down in South Africa. So that was my introduction to the African aviation market, if you like, and a great experience. I'll come back to Comair and Kalula, because what was interesting there was whilst British Airways was able to connect to Comair and did so, Comair obviously flies a British Airways franchise in the British Airways colours, we couldn't touch Kalula as the low-cost unit down in South Africa. And we wanted to offer connections onto Kalula as well. After British Airways, it's a very long story, but I met my wife and we decided we needed to live together. So we chose Doha, Qatar, ostensibly because I got a job with Qatar Airways doing their network and partnership strategy. And the interesting thing then was that was when Qatar was joining One World. And one of the main reasons Qatar joined One World was to get to develop relationships with some of the core One World members, American Airlines, British Airways, and Qantas. Now, Qantas had just signed a joint venture with Emirates, so Qatar's ability to work with Qantas was limited. So the benefits that they saw from traditional partnerships from a membership in such a group structure weren't necessarily as comprehensive as they might have hoped. After Qatar, I ended up moving down to Australia to work for Virgin Australia, where I managed their partnerships in the Europe, Middle East, Africa region. The main one being Etihad, who were a stakeholder in Virgin Australia. And down there was when I really had my introduction into the future of partnerships, if you like, the future of Interline. And that's where the journey to Dohop really began. When I was at VA, and apologies, I'll do this, I'll jump into the 2-letter codes every so often. You might even get the plates at some stage. This was when NDC was developing. NDC as a concept from IATA was really taking a foothold. I began to learn more about this, how we as an airline can develop our content, our rich content, and push that out to customers so they're able to buy, so they've got more choice in terms of product ancillaries, et cetera. And I sat there at Virgin Australia. I used to discuss this with Sandra de Cruz Brits quite a lot. Why can't we do this for partnerships? Our partnerships are quite restrictive in terms of Interline and code, in terms of what they offer and what we have to do to service them. And Etihad are actually a joy to work with because they understood the dynamics of partnerships within the traditional world. And we were able to be quite flexible with them in terms of how we optimized our relationship in Australia. Virgin was in a unique position because everyone needed to work with us. If you weren't working with Qantas and flying to Australia, you had to work with us. You almost had no choice if you wanted to offer connectivity. So we were able to sort of do things more on our terms. So where traditionally, in terms of managing disruption, for example, if Virgin was the disrupting carrier, we didn't always have to follow the traditional IATA rules, if you like. And that really helped me understand a bit more about what the future of partnerships might look like. Now, after 3 years at Virgin Australia, I was offered the opportunity to head up alliances with Vueling in Barcelona. And my wife was quite keen to return to Europe, so it was an ideal opportunity to head back. A bit sad myself. I loved Australia. I love what Virgin was, what it did. But Vueling represented a big opportunity. Now, Virgin, several years previously, had migrated from Navitaire to Sabre. So it had essentially gone from being a low-cost carrier to more of a hybrid. Vueling was, in its origins, a true low-cost carrier, a true low-cost point-to-point carrier hosted in Navitaire. But after IAG purchased Vueling, the need to develop relationships with some of the other IAG members, British Airways and Iberia, was clear. We needed to leverage their distribution strength in Madrid, in the UK. So in order to do that, we had to develop interline and code share relationships, which was a move away from our business model. So we had to develop e-ticket capability in order for BA and IB to sell our services. Now, where the code and interline was designed to enable point-to-point distribution of our services, the attractiveness to offer connections to and from Vueling was also there. We had an extensive network, of course, in Barcelona, but across Europe. So the code and interline evolved into connections as well. But as a ticketless carrier, our ability to manage interline codeshare, especially in terms of things like schedule change, disruption, etc., was limited. So what we actually found was the traditional mechanics really didn't suit us. We were having to introduce a lot of workaround processes, a lot of complexity across the business in order to support what were clear revenue opportunities, but really for the model of airline that we were not ideal in terms of being able to support what we wanted to do. Now, as we continued working on this, another thing that came to us from BAIB and all the interline and codeshare partners that we introduced was the need for us as Vueling to be able to sell them. Most of the relationships, in fact, virtually all the relationships we developed were unilateral. So it was the partner airline connecting onto us and selling our services. But they wanted the opposite. Now, for a nominally ticketless carrier, this represented a major challenge. We weren't desperately familiar with selling in the GDS. Of course, there was costs attached to this, which didn't fit with our model. And it wasn't something we wanted to do. We didn't want to sell them using the traditional methods, the legacy methods, if you like, but we wanted to sell them. So we started to look at how we might be able to do this. And as I left Virgin Australia to join Vueling, I became aware of the virtual interline concept. The group CEO at Virgin Australia was a chap called John Thomas, and I had a coffee with him just before I left, and he said, look at Via Milano, look at Gatwick Connects. There's a company called Dohop who are working with airports to facilitate these self-connections, to put a product around them, to make them more attractive. So, okay, I'll have a look at that. Now, a few months into my career at Vueling, I was traveling through Gatwick and I saw the Gatwick Connects board up and Vueling's name on there. So, oh, crikey, that must be mine. This is partnerships. I haven't seen it on my list. I better find out, what is it, who is responsible for this? And this is where I spoke to our head of distribution and understood that through our API, we were sending this to Travel Fusion, and that was being picked up by Dohop and put into the Gatwick Connects program. So from there, I developed a real interest. And it wasn't long after that we saw Worldwide by EasyJet. And that was a bit of a eureka moment. It's like, hold on. So overnight in terms of the product going live, we've seen a concept where a ticketless carrier, a true ticketless carrier, can sell the likes of Emirates, Singapore, Norwegian. That's interesting. So we looked around, we saw what was on the market in terms of providers who were offering this. The Kiwis, the Air Black Boxes, IAG through Hangar 51 had their own entity, startup, Deep Air. But when we spoke to Dohop and David came over to Barcelona and saw what they had to offer, it was very clear to us that their approach, their model was something that we thought would fit very well. With the content that they already had, with the partners that they had, our ability to be able to connect to airlines we wanted to was clear. But not only this, what was very attractive was the fact that because Dohop integrates API content, we are actually able to offer more content than we can through traditional interline or codeshare relationships, specifically for things like alliance for ancillaries. For a carrier like Vueling, that's essential. That's utterly essential as we develop our ancillary capabilities. In fact, I don't know an airline today that isn't trying to increase the portion of revenue that is coming from that revenue stream. So to be able to develop the ability to connect to these different partners and host them on our e-com platform was clear. One of the key objectives for Vueling has been to bring customers into our storefronts, to generate or to bring as many customers onto our website to see the range of products that we have available in our shop. Previously, it was very limited. It was Vueling product and maybe a bit of British Airways and Iberia. And that was always complicated to get into the platform, distribute and service. All of a sudden, here's an opportunity not only to bring that content in, but to bring richer content in. So for us, that was a key driver. So over the last year or so, the conversations went on. We looked at how we could work with Dohop and develop the platform. But of course, COVID then struck. And all of a sudden, where virtual interline, I'm not always desperately comfortable with the term virtual interline. But I prefer future of partnerships, API connectivity. That concept in itself has only increased in importance. The requirement for airlines to focus on their own content to manage the return of demand, to cater to that return of demand, has only become clearer. So the amount of time, resource, and capital you have to work with traditional relationship types, interline code, has only been reduced. IT teams don't have the bandwidth to implement new relationships. RM teams don't have the same amount of time to work with traditional SPA type relationships. The need to find or work with a solution that is less invasive, but offers more opportunity was crystal clear. So the other thing you had to factor in that networks were reduced, and the need to actually connect to more partners to offer more connections was crystal clear.
Yeah, it's the only way to acquire new passengers, wasn't it?
It's the only way. It's the only way. Going back to my previous point, as you're reducing capacity and seeing your load factors reduce with the services that remain in place, your need to fill as many seats as possible is clearer than it's ever been. Factor in the API consideration I just mentioned, wanting to work with that content, wanting to develop your own pricing with that content, etc. Here is an opportunity to work with a broader range of partners with a broader range of content to fill those seats. It's cheaper. It's a cheaper connectivity option. For me, that was crystal clear. I didn't have to go to IT and say, look, we need to implement a new interline relationship. Please, can we start costing this, working out how much time it's going to take us? Remember, if we wanted to implement 20 different interline relationships, we'd need to do 20 separate implementations. With Dohop, when we plugged in, we had access to all the API content that they had through one, plug and play. So from an airline point of view, the position was clear. From an individual point of view, in terms of the future of partnerships and the direction of travel I thought the industry was going in, I made my mind up. I need to be involved in that. The opportunity is too great. The ability to improve how we do partnerships is too clear. So conversation started around how I could get more involved.
Yeah. So I just to touch on that, because it's almost like, the way we talk about this is, airline to airline, it's a relationship thing. And you had kind of alliances, which were those long-term marriages, long-term commitments. You've got code shares, which obviously it's somewhere up there. Then you've got, then you've got your interlining. Then of course the virtual interlining, or the future of partnerships, as you put it, which is going that way. So it seems like we're seeing a trend over time to people being just more flexible and less wedded to one partner. They're just saying, hey, if you will help me, I'll help you. Let's work together. So the reason I think that's really interesting and this is something we could talk about in sort of an African context, is of course, there are airlines, not just in Africa, but there are airlines that almost don't want to be seen to be working together for political reasons or whatever it may be. This is a way to allow them to do that without having anything formal. Is it?
Yeah. Well, there can be a degree of formality. I mean, if people are going onto your website, for example, you do still want some control over the content that you offer, but there is the ability to work with a broader range of airlines than you have been able to previously. Now, alliances have enabled those partnerships. They've enabled those conversations and the ability to develop relationships. You know, at the end of the 90s, we saw these groups set up that answered a question. They got us around regulatory hurdles. They enabled airlines to come together to improve the customer proposition. This is what I think we're doing now. If you take those traditional alliance structures and carriers in Africa, we've got South African in Star, Kenyan SkyTeam, Ethiopian in Star. They're parts of these groups. But do they have all the access to the partners that they need? The answer is no, because if you look within these groups, you have members who are developing their own low-cost units, and these guys have no access to them. So if we take, or limited access to them, let's look at Star. South African and Ethiopian will both be flying into Germany, to Frankfurt, Munich. Can they access Eurowings? Kenya, with Paris and Amsterdam, are you able to connect to Transavia? What we've seen in the last year, of course, is traditional well, not just the last year, for a period of time now, legacy carriers growing these low-cost units, replacing flying, so that the traditional connections that were enabled through interline and code on the mainline carriers aren't there anymore. They're being operated by a Transavia or a Eurowings. The carriers in Africa themselves are developing their own low-cost units, Qatar Airways and Jumbo Jet. Mm-hmm. So if you're flying into Nairobi and you want to connect it, well, are you going to be able to do it with KQ, or are you going to have to do it with Jumbo Jet in the future? So there's a challenge there within the alliance structures around how you work with some of these lower cost units that are present. So the alliances have helped. They're not able to answer all the questions that currently exist. Now, because of the nature of those business models, we can help. We can create the connections between these different airlines. So Transavia, for example, are a customer of ours. We can work with partners to enable that API-based connectivity. So there's enormous opportunity there, but it comes back to what airlines want to do. What are their ambitions as we go through recovery? What are their strategic imperatives? How are they going to cater to demand when it returns? Where are they going to fly? Who do they need to connect with to fill those aircraft? And there's different requirements for both legacy carriers and low-cost carriers, but ultimately partnerships are going to be relevant for both. And that's where we come in. So if you've got an API available, we can consume that content and enable our platform host to sell your services. That's the first part. Yeah. But we can also offer the Dohop platform for you to host to enable connectivity to airlines that you cannot access today, for whom we have the APIs available. As I mentioned, not only can we create these connections, we can also offer an increased amount of content in terms of ancillaries than is available through the traditional interline and code share type relationships. So if you want to extend your partnership portfolio, this is the way to do it. That's why I've jumped across. I've seen that there are limitations in the traditional interline and code share world that are going to take a while to solve. I mentioned that NDC has been around for how long now? 8-9 years? NDC interline doesn't exist. So in terms of being able to create those legacy type connections where it's not there, this is how we can do it. Everyone's focused on the API. Everyone's focused on how they can develop their content in there. We can take that and make it work for you. But there's another really key point here, and that's that the APIs don't just exist in terms of the airline world. If we think about intermodal, train companies, bus companies, the ability to connect that content is clear as well. We can do that.
Yeah, it's similar to the the concept that we have now about delivery. You want that last mile. Different people are doing things, but I want to post something that's going to go the full way. I don't really care who's handling it along the way. If it's a courier on his bicycle to do that last half a mile, as long as it arrives, it's safe, and I'm happy. We've created that chain for the customer. And I think the thing that you talked about in terms of the partnership element, the thing that we have in the African market is, of course, an incredibly fragmented market. We have a big carrier in African terms, like Ethiopian, with 120 fleet of 120 aircraft. But then after that, they are smaller carriers like Airlink, 50, 60 aircraft, and of course down from there. And these guys, I guess, this is an opportunity for them to realize, do you know what? We're not big enough to float here on our own. We're going to have to start to look at partnerships. And we've seen these partnerships. We've seen interlines. Qatar have been really top of this. They've signed interlines with Airlink and with Saf Air and some of the other airlines down there in South Africa to get them feed and to provide the feed. So do you think, in that market, is that ripe for it because it's so fragmented?
Well, what do customers want? Ultimately, you want to put in play things that customers want. Customers want, well, previously I'd have said choice and convenience, but I'm going to add information to that, very much linked to the situation we find ourselves in today, travel restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. But let's park information for the time being. Choice and convenience. Even the biggest airline can't fly everywhere. It can't offer every O&D. If you want to offer the customer more choice, and you can't offer every O&D for two reasons. One, physical capacity, aircraft. Two, regulatory. So in order to offer more choice, you have to work with different partners, whether that's air, whether that's rail, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to capture that customer, you're going to have to offer more. Now, Interline does that. It helps you, but only if that carrier can do Interline. For a lot of low-cost carriers, Interline isn't a thing. I mentioned Vueling before. We only started interlining when we joined IAG. And it served the purpose, but it was costly and complex. And we're in a moment where no airline really wants to take on board any more cost or complexity than it has to. So the need for partnerships has increased, but the amount of capital and resource that you have to deliver that has gone down. So at the same time, I'll keep saying this, as you're developing your own content, your own product in API form, and you're looking to develop that ancillary component, your ability to service that in the traditional interline environment isn't there. With API connectivity, we can offer the connections, the physical connections between two different airlines, thus increasing the choice from a network point of view. And we can increase the amount of content available in terms of destinations, when you're selling it, the ancillaries that are available, all the things that are limited in terms of code share. For airlines as well, it's not only about implementing interline and code, it's also about managing it, servicing it, loading schedules, making sure that schedules and inventory is synchronized. Again, we're in a moment where those schedules are changing every week, day and hour. So scheduling teams and airlines working in this traditional environment have got more work to do. In the API-based model that Dohop drive, the requirement's completely different. It's we do the work for you. It's a it's not completely non-invasive, but it's a far less invasive, far less expensive way of connecting that is available to customers now, available to airlines and other service providers now. But the other key consideration is convenience. So first of all, you need to increase the choice. You need to increase the number of options you can offer to your customer through your distribution channels. And that is so imperative going forward, whether it's you selling or whether it's a partner selling. You want as much content available as possible and as much choice for the customer so that they're transacting with you. But it's also about convenience. It's also making sure that the customer is looked after, that they can get from their origin to the destination and their journey is protected. their baggage gets to the end point as well. So there's a requirement. It doesn't always work well in the traditional interline and code share world to continue working on that, to continue developing the customer proposition. I touched on travel requirements, travel pass, for example. We're going to have to build that into the industry as well. If I want to connect through, I don't know, Nairobi, if I want to connect through Addis Ababa, and this is equally relevant across the world, what are the requirements and the restrictions country by country? What tests do I need to have? What are the quarantine restrictions? Can I travel if I've been vaccinated? The need to provide as much information to make that customer journey as seamless as possible couldn't be clearer, could not be clearer. And working for a tech company, it's the first time I've worked for a tech company. I don't profess to be one of the most technical people around. As people will know, when I start meetings, virtual meetings online, it takes me a couple of minutes to warm up. The ability to be able to consume that information and build it into the customer journey is there. It's there. Dohop is fully conversant in the tech requirements that will be needed to automate processes, to make customer journeys not only convenient, but to encourage people to start traveling again. So I see a great deal of opportunity there for us to work with our partners, to work with prospective partners, to develop and improve not only the choice they have, but also the experience they have when connecting.
Yeah, and is the solution, just to come into the solution a bit more, because I think you've explained it really well in terms of obviously what it sets out to do, but is it open to carriers of all size? Is there a limitation that they're only going to get value if they're a certain size, or is it open to everyone? And like you said, just go into a little bit more detail about what's involved from their side, because like anything, people are reluctant and resistant to change. There's an amount of inertia with, oh no, I've got to change my PSS. That's going to be a nightmare. Or I've got to change this. And that's the first barrier to overcome. So it's the same with any new technology. One of the first questions, like you said, is some of these airlines have got resources already stretched thinner than ever before, but they're under pressure to recover, and they need to look at things like this as a solution. So give us a bit of info on that side.
Yeah, so there's two things you need to have. One is a desire to make connections, and the other thing is an API. If you've got an API, it doesn't matter what size you are. We can plug that into the platform. That's the most important piece. So there's two things essentially that we offer you. There's the distribution API. So you can plug your content into our platform that would enable our host carriers, our platform carriers, to distribute your services.
Okay.
So if you want your content selling and you've got an API, get in touch with us. We can work with our host carriers to enable connections where you connect. That's the first thing. The second thing is being a host yourself. What is your digital retail strategy? What do you want to do? What do you want to have in your storefront? If you want to be able to offer not only air-to-air connections, but also air-to-rail connections or air-to-bus connections, we can do that for you. We can work with you to develop your capabilities as a retailer to offer more and richer content. So it really depends what your ambition is. So it's as simple as that. If you've got that ambition and you've got that API capability and you're interested in developing partnerships with a range of different operators, we can do that for you. But I must stress, sorry, John, it's not only about airlines and transport service providers, it's also about airports. Now, it's becoming more important for airports at the moment to attract footfall, to bring carriers in, but also to support these type of connections. We know that customers have been doing it for years and years and years. That's why Via Milano started. That's why Gatwick Connect started. People have been doing these journeys for a long time. Now, what we want to do is help improve the airport experience. When that customer is connecting through your airport, how can we work with you to make that connection point of choice? This is going to be a key thing going forward, especially as airlines start to grow their capacity. Where are they going to put it? Well, they're going to put it places where people want to go. And if you're creating more connections, if you're filling more seats, then that works. So we're super interested to talk to airports around how we can further develop our proposition, not only in terms of air to air, but also in terms of air to rail, air to bus, et cetera, et cetera. How can we work with you to develop that customer proposition at your airport?
No, amazing. So I think, whether you're an airport, whether you're an airline, this is something you should definitely be looking at. Go and look at the opportunity. Nick's going to be with us for AviaDev in a few weeks' time as well, and he'll sort of go over some of these points and bring some new points to the table. And it's your opportunity to network with him as well. But anybody who wants to find out a bit more and get in touch with you, Nick, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Well, the best way is to email me or to contact me on LinkedIn. So I'm sure John will flash the details up, but nick@dohop.com, or I'm reasonably active on LinkedIn, so I'm sure you can find me on there and reach out. But
there's also of our listeners are very active on there, so don't worry.
Good. So I can grow my number of connections. Lovely. But also dohop.com. Our website there provides all the relevant information to airlines, airports, and service providers around how you can work with us. Or get more information around the services that we have to offer.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Nick. And as I say, we'll see you in a few weeks for AviaDev Africa. So if you haven't got your ticket and you're listening to this, it is free to register. Do head over to the website. It's aviationdevelop.com/Africa. Get yourself registered today. We've got loads more insightful podcasts coming up for you over the coming weeks. And we're looking forward to continuing to support African aviation to innovate, unite, and thrive, which is our tagline for this year's conference. I think it couldn't be more apt to what we've talked about today. Let's innovate, let's unite, and then we can all thrive. So that wasn't the Dohop tagline, but maybe it could be.
But we like it.
But you like it, absolutely. So thanks again, Nick, and we'll see you in a few weeks. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you for the next episode very soon.